Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here. Today I'm going to be talking about what happened in round 8 of the Sinquefield Cup between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen. Fabiano is having the tournament of tournaments here. He is undefeated so far, 7 out of 7, and beat Magnus in the first half of the tournament and hopes to beat him here. Magnus, on the other hand, is of course the world champion just this past November, beating Anand, the number 1 rated player in the world. So, as you would expect to clash titans here. And without many other things I have to say and ramble on about. Let's begin. The game started out with the Sicilian Dragon here. No surprise here, but Black enters it via a little bit of a weird move order called the Accelerated Dragon move order with this G6 move without committing the knight to F6. The only problem is generally what Black is avoiding some move orders with I think Bishop E3, Bishop G7, and you kind of get these lines with these crazy opposite side castling positions or whatever it is with F3, Queen D2, castling long, and these G4 and H4 positions. Those positions are razor sharp, obviously. If you've seen them before, you know what I'm talking about. But after G6, White took the quiet and calm approach with the C4 pawn push over here, and the positions are completely opposite from the race attack positions, and both sides just continue focusing on their development in this position, developing their knights in the center, making sure everything's stable. D6 by Black to control the squares over here and possibly go with knight G4 if White goes Bishop E3 in this position. So after this, you're actually attacking the bishop, and you have to move the bishop again if you don't want to give up your dark squared bishop here. So instead of Bishop F3, White played a prophylactic move and a supporting move towards the center with F3, preventing knight G4, supporting E4, allowing White to play Bishop E3. This position is pretty interesting. Often Black plays Bishop G7 here, but he can play the continuation of the game, which was taking the knight here, allowing the queen to take here. If you play Bishop G7 first, the problem is White can play Bishop E3, and after knight takes D4, White is not obligated to take with the queen. He can take with the bishop instead, and that actually is considered pretty decent for White. Instead, in the game, we saw instead of bishop here, we saw knight takes D4 instead, forcing the queen to recapture over here. Bishop G7, and now White can get away with this Bishop E3 move. Notice that a move like knight G4 is actually just met by queen takes G7, and the rook would be under attack. And the bishop's not defended here on G7 with the queen here. So instead of just moving the knight here, and by the way, knight H5 doesn't really do anything. By the way, if you're wondering, just queen D2, and Black doesn't really have any concrete threats. So this kind of explains Black's castling moves. And if White plays a wasteful move like Bishop E2, then Black would play Knight G4, attacking the dark squared bishop, attacking the queen. The queen would have to move. Knight takes E3, Queen takes E3. Black is doing really well in this position, and White because White had to give up his dark squared bishop, and that's kind of good for Black and bad for White. Instead of Bishop E2, we saw a prophylactic move in Queen D2, getting out of this diagonal, preventing Knight G4. And in this position, both sides kind of go about their business. One of White's plans in this position is pushing this b pawn either to here or here, developing this bishop over here, trying to castle over here, putting the rooks towards the center, either on the C and D files or on the B and C files over here, once White is fully mobilized. So Black's kind of set up. He can also play bishop. Black can play Bishop E6 in this position, certainly, but in the game he chose a pretty reasonable move, A4, and his idea is to really push the pawn and prevent this B pawn from moving, and kind of White being solid in this kind of position with almost like this iron wall in the center against Black setup here. So in this position, White played B3 anyway, and the idea is just to protect the C4 pawn, play Bishop E2 and castle. That's the normal plan in the Maroczy bind. I feel like White is probably slightly better in this position, and Black decided to go, let's say, wreak havoc in this position with A4, trying to open up the center really quickly. White decided to play B4, which is a really nice move, I think. And you can't really take this pawn. If you take with the pawn here, your pawn structure is just awful here. That's not good for White. And if you take with the knight, you're always prone to these tactical possibilities with knight E4 when the rook is just hanging over here, and well, this is dropping off and obviously not good for Black. For White, I mean. So after A4, White decided to close the position with this pawn kind of pushing the side and just it's kind of beside this pawn, and there's nothing really this a pawn can do to white anymore. And I really don't. For some reason, somewhere here, I mean, Matt Carlsen is just not playing the best and ideal moves. He's just getting a passive position, in my opinion, as we'll see in the game. Carlsen played bishop e6, trying to put some pressure on the c pawn with the rook c8 and the bishop on e6, generating some counterplay here. But white is pretty much easy moves to play against this. He played rook c1, and white's just planning to jump with the knight over here, or to even here protect the c pawn and develop this bishop, continuing his development. And I think white's doing pretty well here. Seeing that this plan was kind of unfolding, I guess black just thought, this knight's not doing much over here in the center because this pawn is just a monster. These pawns are just controlling every square for the knight, and he just wanted to improve the position of this knight right over here with knight d7. Certainly a reasonable move. But after this, white just continued with bishop e2, continuing his development and asking black, what are you going to do about me? What are you going to do about this position? If you give me a couple more moves, I'm just going to castle on knight d5, and you're strategically just worse in this position with the massive knight here on d5 and the pawns, the space advantage in the center. So in this position, Carlsen decided to put a little bit more pressure on the c4 pawn. But Caruana plays a really good move. He can, in this position, Caruana played knight b5, and we'll see the idea behind this just in a second. He can also play knight d5 and put this monster knight on d5 when black really can't tolerate this much more. And notice that this knight is under attack here, so black would probably have to take here with the knight. And after either recapture, a pawn lands on d5, probably with the e takes actually. And let's say this bishop has to go over here. White would probably castle, followed by c5, have a really, really nice position. If you want to be really solid and safe, c takes in is really, really nice for white too, given that he has the space advantage over here. Black is already committed to this weakness over here. Castles probably, and white is probably a bit better in this position, I think. So white could have certainly done this, but he played knight b5, kind of keeping the knight from the claws of this really bad knight over here on b6, and the idea of this move becomes clear. In the game, Carlsen played a3, which is designed against the move I'm about to kind of show you. In this position, if Carlsen played rook c8, the problem with this move is that white can play knight a3, protect the c4 pawn again, and although this knight looks offside, it serves a really, really important duty in just protecting the pawn. And the problem, I guess, Carlsen was really, really worried about in this position is Caruana was daring black to find a plan in this position. And the problem is he really cannot find a constructive plan. Black does not have a single constructive plan. Probably f5 is forced. And in this kind of position, I think, probably in this position, white would just take over here. And, after either recapture, white would just castle and play with the nice central files over here. Is a nice space advantage here on the queen side. White's probably a bit better in this position. So Carlsen didn't really want to play a move like f5 going drastically for some counterplay. He wanted to play something a bit more solid and nothing. We're not a position where he's kind of reduced to playing f5. Let's just say that. So after knight b5, he played a3, preventing knight a3. It makes a lot of sense. The only problem with this move is that white can play knight d4. This was the other idea of playing knight b5 is that he could play knight d4, attacking this bishop, and okay, black can't really try to get pressure over here because white would just take here and castle. This pawn structure is really not nice. Rook d1, controlling the d file, preventing black's d5 break. White is clearly better in this position, actually. So black has to really preserve this bishop in this position. Instead of rook c8, sorry about that, bishop d7 was played. And in this position, I think Caruana pretty much plays. He shows why he's playing for the win. He has a good position here in the center. Black doesn't really have counterplay over here. So now he switches all of his attention towards the king side over here, where we kind of see in the dragon often, white goes often for this king side attack. So he plays the really, really nice move h4 in this position, attempting to play h5. If black is, clueless about the position with rook c8, h5 comes in. This is super dangerous. A takes g, bishop h6, and, takes, and queen h8 is queen h6. I mean, I think Fischer said something like this, but I can't remember the exact quote. Something about this kind of being checkmate or something. And again, that's really dangerous for black, so he doesn't want to allow that. In this position, if h5 is threatened, so black decided to play h5 himself in this position, preventing the h-pawn push. And, after this, black momentarily stops the attack. Momentarily, I mean. But, white decided to continue the pawns rolling here in this position, attack the weakness over here, forcing black to actually take here. And, black doesn't really have an alternative, does not have an alternative. If he plays like rook c8 in this position, I think white just continues with pawn takes pawn, forcing the pawn to be recaptured. And now in this position, white would play rook g1, and you're kind of threatening bishop h6, and it's really hard to meet this move. If you play the king over here, rook g5 comes, and you're picking up the pawn over here on h5. Black's position is really bad here. So this kind of explains the logic behind not allowing this structure. In the game, Carlsen played h take g, and certainly Caruana could have played h5 here. This is interesting, but he plays the safe and sound f takes g4, still kind of keeping h5 in mind without giving any material away after h5 did immediately. It might have immediately. And in this position, Carlsen's position is really, really uncomfortable. If you look at it from the black side, look at this position. You see h5 coming down your throat. This is really, really uncomfortable with these really, really dead pieces over here doing nothing on the queen side. And it's kind of a miserable position in all for black. So he's got to gain active counterplay. He's pretty much desperate at this point to do anything. And compared to the other position I was talking about with desperate for counterplay, this one is already leading to an attack if Carlsen is inept about the position. So he's got to react fast. In this position, Carlsen played e5, counterattacking the center, taking his own space. And the idea is that after what Caruana played with knight b3, he could follow this up with bishop c6, and we'll see why this is kind of a good plan for Carlsen. White could have also played knight b5 here, but I think after bishop takes, pawn takes bishop d5, black is getting more counterplay than he deserves. Even though white has bishop c5 in this position, black probably can play bishop f6, attacking this pawn, and this is probably not that bad for black in comparison to the other line with just knight b3. The idea with knight b3 is that you're kind of reducing black's counterplay in this position. You're not letting this bishop exchange itself for the knight over here, misplacing the pawn over here and allowing black to play d5. Knight b3, on the other hand, doesn't allow any of that. So black is forced to play bishop c6, attacking the pawn over here with the bishop, forcing white to play bishop f3, defending the pawn. And in this position, this was Carlsen's idea. This is what he's banking everything the game on. f5 to open up the position, open up his rook over here, try to get his bishop active on this diagonal. And with this kind of move, it's probably the only move in the position, really. I mean, if you give white the opportunity, he'll play g5 or h5 in this position, and black's toast positionally. He's just going to get mowed over on the king side over here. So he played f5. Only move, really, in my opinion. So after this, white decided to recapture over here. Black takes, and at least he has the g file to work with in this position. And I guess one key idea after Caruana's next move, which was really nice, he played knight a5, attacking the bishop, threatening to just take over here and break open the whole position, or take advantage of the position, I mean. And one idea in this position is that black can't really take the pawn over here with this pawn over here. And the problem with this kind of move is that white would probably just take over here, capturing the bishop, forcing b takes c6, and after bishop e4, these two nice bishops, two nice open files over here, the h-pawn over here pushing itself, is pretty much a decisive factor in this position for white. Black can't really play this tactical counter shot with knight takes c4, forking these two pieces. And the idea behind this is that he can play d5, forking the rook and bishop over here, but I think white can just take over here on c6 and kind of give the piece back, and this position is really, really unplayable for black, given that his bishop's dead and white's going to play rook c7, push the h-pawn, have a really nice bishop, in addition to having the passed pawn over here to work with. White is probably winning this position. I mean, that's just kind of one example of how black can't really afford to open up the position, even if his rook is kind of trying to get active. So in this position, he decided to play, f4 before things got bad, closing the position, hopefully trying to find some salvation in the closed position here. And in this position, white dropped the bishop back, very safe. And even though the pawn, this is a passed pawn, this is firmly blockaded by these two bishops here. This position's very, very nice for white. And in this position, Black didn't really see anything better. It's hard to recommend anything for Carlsen in this position. His position's just not good strategically and positionally. I mean, this bishop's just terrible. This bishop's just terrible. Both bishops are terrible. This knight sucks. This rook's not really active. This rook is biting on its own pawn. Queen is not really active, and the whole position's really, really not comfortable for Black. He played knight a4, trying to influence the position, I guess. I'm not really sure what this knight does other than going to b2. He's got to do something, I guess, but it's tough. It's tough, really. White just took the bishop over here, and after pawn takes here, he castled. Instead of castling in this position, one idea that you can consider is that since this is a closed center, and since white has really, really nice space over here with the two bishops and the queen and the rook supporting it all, you can play king e2, trying to switch over to the king side over here, breaking open the h-file, trying to rely on the king side attack to work for you. One other idea of king e2 is, okay, it connects the rooks, but this rook doesn't even have to go here. This rook, I mean, can also go to the d file, and white can play in the center. White doesn't really have to also, white doesn't just have to play on the king side, so he can play in the center if he wants to. This position is really, really nice for white, in my opinion. I would have played king e2, but in the game he plays a pretty decent move in castling, and Carlsen didn't really see anything better than the game continuation. In this position, Black could try bishop f6, going for the pawn, but I think this is a bit suicidal, as White can probably just play king g2, and I think, or is it king? Is it another move? Maybe it's king h1 or something. I can't remember that well. Let's see. Yeah, probably. I think White would just play king g2 or something, and the idea is that after probably just bishop takes h4, White can utilize the h file for his rook over here, and if the bishop has to move back or take itself over here, White is ready to deliver a kingside attack over here on the king. King f1, king e2, bringing the other rook over here is just another idea, or just rook g1 followed by king f1 is the idea. That's not good for White. That's not good for Black. I mean, and that's just one idea. I mean, usually Carlsen just wanted to close the position with c5. It's really hard to recommend anything else in this position. And after this, with the c5 move, White closed the position with b5 and really just kind of locked up the center over here, forcing the matters over here. And in this position, Carlsen and kind of ended up playing bishop f6, keeping an eye on this pawn, probably preferring bishop e7 to overprotect the pawn over here. This position's passive, and it's just not good for Black. And in this position, Caruana plays a really, really nice silent move with king h1, kind of keeping his ideas open. And one idea in this position is that if Black captures over here on the h4 pawn, we can kind of see one idea being utilized in this position. Rook g1 check with the king stuck over here. The king would have to move over either to h8 or h7, but in any case, I think after king h7, White would have the really, really strong rook g4, double attacking this bishop. And, Black is really, really struggling here. If bishop takes here, queen takes here, there's already probably even a mate here. If rook f6, trying to bring a defender over here, I think rook h4 is already pretty much sealing the deal here with this kind of tactical line with queen h2, queen h5, rook g1 coming over here. Black is even mated. Keeping this in mind with this rook g1 idea, Black cannot obviously take. In this position, Carlsen actually just decided to retreat the knight and kind of bring the knight back into the game, prevent the d5 controlling over the d5 square. It still doesn't kind of prevent the pressure over here from d6 from happening, but at least the knight kind of comes back into the game, and this is probably not it's a pretty good move by Carlsen, but in this kind of position, I think he is just positionally just bankrupt. In this position, Caruana decided to play rook cd1. In retrospect, I think White should play rook fcd1 and keep the pawn protected over here. After rook fd1, I think Black probably has to play bishop e7 protecting the pawn. And I mean, it's tough to say what he should do. I mean, after bishop e7, there's this one line that's not good for Black actually, but I mean, it's hard to recommend anything else. Again, bishop takes here is not leading to a good position because White gives this check actually, and similar to the other line, instead of rook g4 here, I think White can just play rook g2, going for rook h2, and it's really hard to defend the position. I don't know. I mean, if rook a7 trying to swing the rook over here. There's actually this tactical shot with bishop takes h4. The queen can't recapture because of rook h2, and if you play rook h7, it almost looks like black is regaining the piece, but white just plays rook h2, and after rook here, queen f2 happens. The rook is attacked twice, and there's no way to defend this position. And probably just takes over here, rook g1, black gets mated. So obviously, unfortunately, not obviously, unfortunately, that line doesn't even work, even after the rook moves over here. The idea behind this move is that I think after bishop e7, the only way to defend the d pawn really, a move like knight c8 is just atrocious. Queen d5 picks up the rook after knight c8, so that's not playable. And bishop e7 is the only move, but in this position, white has a really nice tactical shot with bishop takes c5, and black's position collapses actually. And the idea is that if you take the bishop, I'm playing queen g2, and it's not even just the queen I'm winning here with this check and the discovery over here. After king h8, rook takes here. I don't know, rook here. White plays queen g4. Queen h5 is unstoppable, and the e5 pawn is hanging in this position. And if you don't defend against queen h5, and if the king has to move, rook g1 comes in. I think we've seen this already a lot. White is checkmating. I think rook fd1 is a better move. Perhaps black has a more stingy defense after rook fd1, but it's really tough to play in a practical game. So in this position, he played rook cd1. The only problem with this continuation is that it allows black to play king h8, and the thing about this position is that since the d6 pawn, he just lets the d6 pawn hang. And the thing is, in this position, black can't really take the pawn here yet, just because of queen d5 forking the knight and the king over here. So he plays this preparatory move, king h8, a good move in my opinion, allowing knight takes c4 next move. And Caruana, I guess, was a little bit impatient, and I mean, there's nothing really better. I can't really blame him, but as we saw, rook fd1 is probably a better in my opinion, and he played this line with queen takes d6, allowing the queen trade, black to take here on c4, activate his pieces, and compared to the position before, this looks like heaven for black, as he didn't really have any active pieces, and at least you can see some pieces coming to life over here on the d file, on the b file. Black has this pass pawn over here. Maybe I think black is doing okay, but still, I mean, white should still have a better position here. In the game, Caruana played rook d5, which is probably not the best move. He should just continue with rook d7, kind of relying on the b pawn to be a factor in this position. And I think black should probably play knight e3, going for this opposite colored bishop position. And this rook is not really well placed, and white probably just has to take here. And after f takes, b6 pushing the pawn gives white good chances to make further progress. The only problem with the game is that the game doesn't really lead to progress. After rook d5, black plays knight e3, forks the rooks over here on d5 and f1, forces the capture over here, f takes, and black threatens this pawn right over here. And it's really tough to play for white. He played bishop e2, but if you play a move like h5, bishop h4 comes, and black has this really amazing idea with rook takes f3, forcing the game to be simplified into an endgame that I think black would be really happy to play. If white plays rook takes here, then I think black just sacrifices the exchange on f3, forcing rook takes f3. The pawn pushes itself through, forces the white rook to give it up for itself. Rook e3, pawn promotion, takes, pawn takes over here, rook takes pawn. I think black should hold the game pretty easily. Even though white has 3 distant pass pawns over here, his minor piece should definitely compensate for that. It should end in a draw. So instead of that, we saw, let's see if I can find it, takes. We just saw bishop e2 kind of meeting bishop takes h4, with a possible rook trade, avoiding all rook takes f3 ideas with the bishop still here, and the pawn kind of coordinating to promotion. So in this position, I think Caruana played rook f5, and I mean, he could play rook takes f8, and I think the main line goes rook d3, trying to take the pawn. But even in this position, black Black has a lot of safe options with bishop f2, just preserving a pretty draw in endgame. But one active possibility you can consider is rook f2, and certainly white could take the pawn, but you might consider this option with b6, trying to promote the pawn. And this is kind of a crazy line that I was looking at. Black plays rook takes e2, pawn pushes, and the idea is that he'll have rook b3 supporting the pawn over here to promote. If black plays rook b2, then white plays rook b3 and should win, right? It makes a lot of sense that this should win for white. But the problem is white doesn't actually win this position. He just takes the rook. And now in this position, even though white is queening with check, black plays e2, and this is also being threatened. And even though white queens with check, there's no way to really round up the pawn over here on this square. So the game will probably end up in a draw by perpetual check, sadly. I don't know, king h7. The game should end in a draw, remarkably. Quite a remarkable line, actually, and just crazy. Even though queen versus bishop and pawn in that position, just an amazing line, really. Black has numerous ways to draw the game, I think. I think Caruana didn't want anything crazy like in those kind of complications. He played rook f5, and this ends the game really, really quickly, I think, into a drawish position after rook takes, pawn takes here, rook d8, forcing the exchange. I mean, you don't really want black to activate here, and suddenly you're getting the one under pressure here with everything kind of under attack with e2 coming. So he just decided to trade over here, and we have pretty much a dead drawn position here. Carlsen gives up the pawn here to activate his bishop over here. The position is a bunch of shuffling moves here. Actually, they just agreed to a draw in this position, but one plan that white can really try is king d5, but unfortunately this is not winning for white. Black can play bishop here, king here. This is kind of the line that I was thinking of, and to try and win for white, but it just doesn't work. King here to try to push the pawn through, but black can push e4. Notice that white cannot take here because of e2, so he's got to back up the bishop here. King takes f5, b6, and now black can sacrifice over here. And amazingly, black is making it in time to draw the game in this position. And after king d4, king f2, bishop wherever, here, here. The game ends in a draw by this kind of interesting pattern where the king gets stalemated in the corner, and white, it's a draw. So anyways, a pretty interesting, well played game by Carlsen, defending that mess of a position, somehow escaping. Caruana definitely missed his chance with rook fd1, controlling the whole position, and I think Carlsen would have been in real trouble after that. I mean, Carlsen played not such a great opening, and no offense to you Dragon players, but I don't think the Moraxi bind is that fun for black to play, as white gets the space advantage, and Carlsen could have really gotten in trouble if, seriously, again, even mated with if he wasn't careful at multiple points, and could have gotten that position after rook d1, as I mentioned. Caruana could have played king e2 at some later moment, as I was saying. In this kind of position, king e2 is probably reasonable. Instead of castling, I mean, king e2 is also reasonable, keeping his options open. White had a lot of options, but I think a pretty exciting draw, don't you think? I think it was pretty exciting, and with this draw, Carlsen stops Caruana's tear through the tournament, and with this is Caruana's only draw of the tournament so far. He stays at a lousy 7.5 out of 8. Oh, what a disappointing result for Caruana, not winning the game. Shame on him. Carlsen finally draws the tournament's number, this tournament star, and I think it was just an amazing game to watch. I'm really glad to have gone over this game. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you liked the video. Just leave a comment if you have a problem with anything. Thanks for watching again. And, I'll be posting the other games soon. Thanks for watching.